The morning in the Grand City Hotel started like any other day, full of noise, movement, and rich guests walking with pride. The marble floors were shining, and waiters were moving fast to serve breakfast. But no one knew that this normal morning was about to turn into something unforgettable. In the middle of this busy place, a small girl suddenly ran inside the hotel. She looked around with wide, searching eyes, breathing heavily as if she had been running for a long time. Her clothes were simple and old, showing she came from a poor life. Her hair was slightly messy, and her small hands were shaking. The security guard noticed her and tried to stop her, but she slipped past him easily, as if something stronger than fear was pushing her forward. The girl kept running until she reached the center lobby where a tall man in a luxury suit was standing with his business partners. He was a powerful millionaire known across the city, a man who never showed emotions and always stayed in control. His name was Daniel, and today he was discussing an important deal, unaware that his life was about to change forever. Suddenly, the small girl stopped right in front of him. The entire lobby seemed to slow down. People turned their heads to see what was happening. Without thinking or hesitating, the little girl looked up at Daniel and held onto his coat tightly. Then in a soft but emotional voice, she said one word that froze everyone in the room. "Daddy," the word echoed in the silent lobby like a shockwave. Daniel's expression changed instantly. He froze completely. His eyes widened slightly, not from anger but confusion. He had never seen this child before in his life. The people around him also became silent. Some gasped, some stepped back, and others started whispering. The atmosphere turned heavy, as if time had stopped. The little girl did not let go of his coat. Her eyes were filled with tears but also hope. She repeated again, "Daddy, I found you." Her voice was soft, innocent, and full of pain. It did not sound like a mistake. It sounded like a truth she believed with her whole heart. Daniel slowly looked down at her. Something inside him felt strange, something he could not explain. The child's face looked unfamiliar, but her eyes felt deeply familiar, like a forgotten memory trying to return. Before he could speak, a woman suddenly rushed into the lobby. She was out of breath, wearing a simple Maid uniform, and her face turned pale the moment she saw the scene. She froze in fear. It was Sarah, the hotel maid. Her tray slipped from her hands and fell on the floor with a loud crash. The sound broke the silence, but not the tension. She looked at the child holding Daniel and whispered in shock, "No, no, this cannot happen." Her voice trembled. Daniel shifted his gaze from the child to the woman. Something in his expression changed slowly, as if pieces of a lost memory were trying to connect. The girl still held onto him tightly and said again, "Daddy, don't leave me." Her small voice carried years of loneliness and pain. The entire hotel staff was now watching in silence. No one understood what was happening, but everyone could feel it was something deeply emotional and dangerous. Daniel's heart beat faster for the first time in years. A millionaire who controlled businesses, people, and money suddenly felt something he could not control at all. The presence of this child was shaking him from inside. And in that moment, one question formed in his mind that changed everything. Who was this girl? And why did she call him daddy like it was the most natural truth in the world? The entire lobby remained frozen after the shocking moment. The word daddy was still hanging in the air like an echo that refused to disappear. Daniel stood completely still, looking down at the small girl who was still holding his coat tightly. His mind was trying to understand what just happened, but nothing made sense. He had never met this child before. He was sure of it. Yet the way she looked at him, it felt like she already knew him from somewhere deep in her heart. The little girl did not move. Her eyes were still filled with tears, but there was also relief in her face, as if she had finally found something she had been searching for her whole life. She whispered again, softly, "Daddy, I knew you would come." That sentence hit harder than before. Daniel slowly bent down to her level. For the first time, the powerful millionaire was not standing above anyone. He was now face to face with a child who was shaking but still holding onto him like he was her only hope. "I think you are confused," Daniel said in a calm but unsure voice. "I am not your father." His words were firm, but there was no anger in them. The girl shook her head immediately. "No, you are my daddy," she said again with full confidence, like she had repeated this truth in her mind many times before. Her small hands tightened around his coat. The lobby staff watched silently. Some of them felt emotional, others confused, but everyone could feel something strange in the air. It was not just a random mistake. It felt deeper. At that moment, Sarah, the maid, finally moved forward. Her legs were weak and her face was pale. She tried to reach the girl, but she stopped halfway. Her lips were trembling. She wanted to speak, but no sound came out. Daniel noticed her reaction immediately. He stood up slowly and turned toward her. "You," he said in a low voice. "Who is this child?" Sarah lowered her head. She looked like she was carrying a heavy burden that she had hidden for years. Her hands were shaking badly. "Sir, please," she whispered, but she could not finish her sentence. The girl looked back at Sarah and then at Daniel. "Mama," she said softly, "you said we would find him." Those words created a deeper silence. Daniel's expression changed slightly. He looked at Sarah again, this time more seriously. Something inside him started to feel uncomfortable, like a locked memory was trying to break free. "Explain this," Daniel said firmly. His voice was controlled, but now there was pressure in it. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She finally stepped closer, but she did not look at Daniel. She was looking at the ground. "Sir, I never wanted this to happen here," she said softly. "I tried to protect her from this truth." Daniel frowned. "Truth," he repeated. The word felt heavy. The girl still stood between them, confused but not afraid. She looked at Daniel again and said, "Daddy, why don't you remember me?" That question struck something deep inside him. Daniel felt a strange pressure in his chest. He took a step back. His mind was now filled with questions he could not answer. Sarah finally lifted her head slightly, but her eyes were full of pain. "Her name is Emily," she said slowly. "And she believes you are her father." Daniel's eyes widened slightly. The name did not trigger memory, but it triggered emotion. A strange feeling he could not understand. The lobby was still silent, but now it felt heavier. People were no longer just watching. They were waiting for something big to break open. Daniel looked at Emily again. Her face, her eyes, her expression, something about her felt deeply familiar, but he could not place it anywhere in his past. "This is impossible," Daniel said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. Sarah took a shaky breath. "Sir, years ago. I worked somewhere else before this hotel," she said slowly, struggling with every word. "And I knew you, but everything changed after that day." Daniel's mind started to spin. The child held his hand again and said softly, "Daddy, don't leave me again." That sentence broke through his confusion. It was not just words. It was pain, real pain. Daniel stood there, completely silent now. Something was wrong. Something from the past was buried so deep that it had suddenly started to rise again, and he did not know if he was ready to face it. The silence in the hotel lobby continued even after the shocking exchange. Daniel was still standing in the same place, but now his mind was no longer calm. Something inside him had been disturbed in a way he could not ignore. The small girl, Emily, was still holding his hand tightly, as if letting go would make her lose everything again. Her innocent eyes were fixed on his face, waiting for recognition, waiting for a reaction that never came. Daniel slowly pulled his hand back, not in anger but in confusion. He took a step away and looked at Sarah again, the maid who seemed terrified of the situation. His voice was lower now, but sharper with seriousness. "I want answers," he said firmly. "Right now." Sarah's hands trembled as she stood there. She looked like she had been carrying a secret for many years, and now it was breaking her from inside. She glanced at Emily, then at Daniel, and finally lowered her eyes. "Sir, please don't do this here," she whispered, but Daniel did not move. "You came into my hotel," he said coldly, "and your child called me something impossible. You don't get to walk away without explaining." The guests around them were still watching, but the security had backed away, sensing this was no ordinary situation. Emily stood quietly now, confused by the tension. She looked at her mother, then at Daniel, sensing that something important was happening, something about her life she didn't fully understand. Daniel took out his phone and made a quick call. "Bring me everything about this employee," he said to his assistant. "Every record, every detail, now." Sarah's face went pale when she heard that. Her body shook slightly. She knew Daniel was not a man who made empty threats. Minutes passed like hours. The lobby remained tense. No one spoke. No one moved. Finally, Daniel's assistant arrived with a tablet and a file. He handed it over silently. Daniel started reading. At first, it was just normal information, employment records, address, basic history, but then something caught his attention. Sarah had started working at his company almost 6 years ago, the exact same time his personal life had gone through a major disappearance. Daniel's eyes narrowed. He continued reading. There was a gap in Sarah's records. A missing period of almost 1 year that was not properly documented. "What is this?" Daniel asked sharply, pointing at the gap. Sarah's lips trembled. She stepped forward slightly but stopped. I was not working anywhere official during that time," she said quietly. Daniel's eyes stayed fixed on her. "Where were you then?" he asked. No answer came immediately. Emily walked closer to Sarah and held her dress. "Mama?" she asked softly. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment as if gathering strength. Then she finally spoke. "I was working in a private estate," she said slowly. "Not this city, far away." Daniel's expression changed slightly. Something about that statement triggered a distant memory, but it was still unclear. He stepped closer now. "Whose estate?" he asked. Sarah hesitated again. The entire lobby felt like it was holding its breath. Then she whispered, "Your father's estate." The words hit Daniel like a sudden shock. His face went still. His father's estate was a place he had not thought about deeply in years, a place full of control, power, and strict rules. He looked at Sarah carefully now, trying to connect invisible dots. "Why were you there?" he asked slowly. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Because I was assigned there as staff," she said. "And that is where I met you." Daniel frowned. "Met me?" he repeated. She nodded slowly. "You used to visit that estate during business trips. You stayed there sometimes." Daniel's memory started to blur. He remembered parts of those trips, but nothing clear, nothing that explained a child. Emily tugged his coat again. "Daddy," she said softly. Daniel flinched slightly at the word, but now it did not feel like confusion alone. It felt like something buried deep inside his past. Sarah finally looked directly at him. Her voice was trembling but honest. "Sir, after that time, everything changed and I left without telling you." Daniel stared at her, trying to understand. "Left what?" he asked. Sarah swallowed hard. "I left the estate and later I found out I was pregnant." The words fell into silence like a heavy stone. Daniel did not move. His expression froze completely. The entire lobby seemed to disappear around him. Only one thought remained in his mind now. A child, a hidden past, and a truth he was never told. Emily looked up at him again and whispered, "Daddy, are you remembering now?" Daniel could not answer. Because for the first time in his life, he felt like his entire world was standing on a truth he had never known existed. The moment Sarah's words fell into the silence, the entire lobby felt like it had stopped breathing. Daniel stood completely still, his eyes fixed on her as if trying to decide whether what he just heard was real or impossible. "You are saying you were pregnant?" he asked slowly, his voice lower than before. There was no anger in it now, only shock and disbelief. Sarah's eyes were filled with tears as she nodded. She could barely hold herself together. "Yes," she whispered. "But I never had the chance to tell you." Emily was still holding Daniel's coat, looking between both adults with confusion. She did not fully understand the conversation, but she could feel the heavy emotion in the air. She only knew one thing in her heart. The man standing in front of her felt like her father. Daniel took a slow step back. His mind was now fighting with itself. Everything Sarah was saying sounded impossible, yet something inside him refused to fully reject it. He looked at Emily again. The shape of her face, the eyes, even the way she held on to him, it all felt disturbingly familiar now. "This cannot be true," Daniel said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. Sarah quickly stepped forward. "Sir, I am not lying," she said with urgency. "I worked in your father's estate. I met you there during your visits. You were kind to me. You didn't know my situation fully, but—" She stopped, her voice breaking. Daniel's expression hardened slightly. "My father's estate," he repeated, that name again. His father was a powerful man, strict and controlling. Daniel had always followed him, trusted his decisions, but he also knew his father kept secrets, many secrets. Daniel looked away for a moment, trying to recall those days. He remembered visiting the estate during business trips, staying there briefly, meeting workers, signing deals, and leaving quickly. It was a time of his life that felt distant, almost mechanical. But he could not remember Sarah clearly. That made everything more confusing. "If what you are saying is true," Daniel said slowly, "why did you disappear?" Sarah lowered her head again. "Because your father found out I was pregnant," she said softly. The words made Daniel's eyes sharpen immediately. "What?" he asked. Sarah continued, her voice shaking. "He called me into his office. He told me I was not allowed to stay. He said I would destroy your future and your reputation. Gave me money and ordered me to leave quietly." Daniel's face slowly changed. A mixture of shock and anger started forming. "And you left?" he asked. Sarah's eyes filled with tears again. "I had no choice," she said. "I was alone, I was scared, I believed I was protecting you." Emily tightened her grip on Daniel's coat as if sensing the rising tension. Daniel slowly clenched his jaw. "So you are telling me," he said carefully, "that my father forced you away and I never knew any of this?" Sarah nodded. "Yes," she whispered, "and I gave birth to her alone." The entire lobby was completely silent. Even the staff had stopped moving. Everyone was now fully aware that they were witnessing something far beyond a normal misunderstanding. Daniel turned his head slowly toward Emily again. His eyes softened slightly, but his confusion was still there. "How old are you?" he asked the child gently. Emily looked up at him. "6," she said softly. Daniel froze for a second. His mind quickly calculated the timeline Sarah had mentioned. 6 years matched exactly with the time she said she left. His heart started beating faster. He looked at Sarah again. "Why didn't you come back?" he asked. Sarah shook her head. "Your father threatened me," she said. "He said if I ever returned, I would lose her forever." Daniel's fists slowly tightened. A hidden anger started building inside him now, not at Sarah, but at the situation, at the unknown control his father had over his life without him even realizing it. He took a deep breath. "So all these years," Daniel said slowly, "I had a daughter I never knew about." Sarah nodded silently. Emily looked up again and softly said, "Daddy, are you angry?" That one innocent question broke through everything. Daniel looked down at her, and for the first time his expression changed completely. The confusion did not disappear, but something else appeared. A deep emotional conflict. He slowly bent down again, looking directly into Emily's eyes. "No," he said quietly, "I'm not angry at you." There was a pause. The entire room was still watching. Daniel's voice lowered even more. "But I need to know the truth fully," he said. He stood up slowly and turned toward Sarah again. "And if what you are saying is real, then this is not just your story," he said firmly. "This is mine too." The weight of his words filled the room. Sarah closed her eyes, knowing there was no turning back now. Emily stayed close to Daniel, as if afraid he might disappear again. And for the first time, Daniel realized that his life was no longer just about business or power anymore. Something deeply personal had just entered his world, and it was demanding the truth he had never been allowed to see. The atmosphere in the hotel lobby had completely changed now. What started as a normal business morning had turned into a deep emotional storm that no one could ignore. Daniel stood silently for a moment, still processing everything Sarah had said. His mind was full of questions, but now one thing was becoming clear to him slowly. This was not just a misunderstanding anymore. This was a hidden part of his life that had been taken away from him. Emily was still close to him, holding his hand tightly as if afraid he might disappear again. Sarah stood a few steps away, her face pale, waiting for Daniel's reaction. The entire room was silent, as if the world itself was watching what he would do next. Daniel finally took a deep breath and straightened his posture. His expression changed from confusion to seriousness. "I want proof," he said firmly. His voice was calm but powerful. "If this is true, then it needs to be verified." Sarah nodded slowly. "I understand," she said softly. "I have documents, hospital records, everything." Daniel looked at his assistant and gave a short command. "Bring everything she has, and also run a full background check. I want full confirmation." The assistant quickly left. Meanwhile, whispers started spreading among the hotel staff. A millionaire possibly having a hidden daughter was something no one expected to witness in real life. But Daniel was not focused on them. His eyes were now fixed on Emily. Something inside him was shifting. Even without confirmation, he could feel a strange emotional connection forming. Minutes later, the assistant returned with documents. Daniel took them and started reading carefully. Hospital records, dates, and files were all there. Everything matched Sarah's story. His expression slowly changed as he read each page. The more he read, the heavier his silence became. Finally, he lowered the papers. He did not speak immediately. He just stood there as if trying to understand how years of his life had been hidden from him. "These records seem real," he said slowly. Sarah's eyes filled with relief, but she did not smile. She knew this was only the beginning, not the end. Suddenly, a new voice entered the scene, a sharp, powerful voice. "Enough!" Everyone turned their heads. An older man had arrived. He was well-dressed, confident, and carried authority in his walk. It was Daniel's father. The entire room felt even more tense now. Daniel's expression changed instantly. "Father," he said slowly. The older man looked at Sarah and Emily with cold eyes. "I knew this would come out one day," he said firmly. Sarah stepped back slightly in fear. Emily hid behind Daniel's leg. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "So it's true," he said. "You knew about this." His father did not deny it. Instead, he walked closer. "You were too young to understand back then," he said. "That girl was a maid. A relationship like that would have destroyed your future and this family's reputation." Daniel's jaw tightened. "So you removed her from my life without telling me?" he asked sharply. The older man stayed calm. "I protected you," he said. "That is what a father does." But Daniel did not accept that answer anymore. He looked at Sarah, then at Emily, and something inside him finally broke the silence of years. "You did not protect me," Daniel said firmly. "You controlled me." The room went silent again. His father's expression hardened. "Be careful with your words," he warned, but Daniel did not step back this time. For the first time in his life, he stood directly against him. "You took away my right to know my own child," Daniel said. "That is not protection, that is betrayal." Emily looked up at Daniel quietly. "Daddy," she whispered. Daniel looked at her and slowly bent down, placing a hand on her shoulder. His voice softened. "I am here," he said. "And I am not leaving." Sarah's eyes filled with tears again, but this time it was different. It was not fear anymore. It was relief mixed with pain. The older man looked at the scene in silence. For the first time, he realized Daniel was not going to accept control anymore. Daniel stood up again and turned toward him. "From this moment," he said clearly, "I will find out everything myself. No more lies, no more control." His father stared at him for a moment, then slowly turned away without another word. The silence returned after he left, but now it felt different, heavier but clearer. Daniel looked at Sarah and Emily again. Everything was still uncertain, but one truth had already become strong in his heart. Something that was taken from him years ago was standing right in front of him now. And no matter how complicated the truth was, he was not going to walk away from it again. After the shocking confrontation with his father, the atmosphere inside the hotel slowly started to settle, but the tension was still heavy in the air. Daniel stood in silence for a long moment, watching the direction where his father had just left. His mind was not calm. It was filled with anger, confusion, and something deeper he could not fully express. For the first time in his life, he felt like the foundation of everything he believed in had cracked. Emily was still standing beside him, quietly holding his hand. She looked up at him with innocent eyes, as if trying to understand what just happened. Sarah stood a little distance away, still emotional, still afraid, but also relieved that the truth was no longer fully hidden. Daniel slowly turned his attention back to Emily. The noise of the world around him faded. In that moment, nothing else mattered, only her. He gently knelt down again so he was at her eye level. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. Emily nodded slightly but did not let go of his hand. "You are not going away again, right?" she asked in a small voice. That question hit Daniel deeply. He paused for a moment before answering. "No," he said firmly, "I'm not going anywhere." There was a short silence, then something unexpected happened. Emily slowly stepped closer and hugged him. It was not a small gesture. It was full trust, full emotion. Daniel froze for a second, then slowly placed his hand on her back. It was the first time he had ever held her like this, and strangely, it felt natural. Sarah watched this moment quietly. Tears formed in her eyes again, but she did not stop them this time. She had carried this pain alone for years, and now seeing it slowly turning into acceptance was overwhelming for her. Daniel slowly stood up again and looked at Sarah. "Why did you never try to contact me directly?" he asked. His voice was calm now but serious. Sarah lowered her head. "I tried once," she said quietly, "but I was stopped before I could reach you. After that, I was warned never to come close again." Daniel clenched his jaw slightly. The control his father had over everything was now becoming clearer. "So you raised her alone all these years?" he asked. Sarah nodded. "Yes," she said. "I worked 2 jobs, I struggled every day, but I never told her anything bad about you. I only told her that one day she might find her father." Emily looked up at Daniel again. "Mama always said you were good," she said softly. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. That sentence affected him more than he expected. Even after everything, Sarah never filled the child's heart with hate, only hope. He opened his eyes again and looked at them both. Slowly, something inside him started to change. The anger was still there, but now it was mixing with responsibility. A responsibility he never knew he had. "From today," Daniel said slowly, "things will change." Sarah looked at him carefully. "What do you mean?" she asked. Daniel straightened his posture. "She will not live in struggle anymore," he said firmly. "Neither will you." Sarah shook her head slightly. "Sir, I don't want charity," she began, but Daniel raised his hand gently to stop her. "This is not charity," he said. "This is my responsibility." There was silence again. Emily looked between both of them, not fully understanding everything but feeling safe for the first time in a long while. Daniel called his assistant again. "Cancel all my meetings for the week," he ordered. The assistant looked shocked but nodded immediately. "Yes, sir." Sarah's eyes widened slightly. "You don't have to stop your life because of this," she said quickly. Daniel looked at her directly. "I already did," he replied. "I just didn't know it until today." The words were simple but powerful. Emily held his hand again and smiled slightly for the first time. "So, I can stay with you?" she asked softly. Daniel looked down at her and nodded. "Yes," he said, "you are staying with me." That moment changed everything, not just for Emily but for Daniel too. A man who lived his life surrounded by power, money, and control was now facing something far more important: connection, responsibility, family. Sarah slowly stepped closer. "What about your father?" she asked carefully. Daniel's expression became serious again. "I will deal with him," he said, "but not today." He looked at Emily again and softened his voice. "Today is about you." The child smiled again, this time more openly. It was small but real. Daniel felt something inside him that he had never experienced before. Not success, not victory, something quieter, something warmer. And as he stood there with Sarah and Emily beside him, he realized that his life had already started changing without permission and without warning. The next few days after the shocking revelation changed everything in Daniel's life. The man who once lived only for business meetings, profits, and power was now living a completely different reality. For the first time, his schedule no longer controlled him. Instead, something far more important did. Emily, the small girl who once ran into a hotel lobby calling him Daddy, had now become the center of his world. Daniel brought Sarah and Emily to his private estate, a place that was usually quiet and filled with luxury, but now felt different. It was no longer just a symbol of wealth. It was becoming a place of healing, confusion, and slowly building connection. Emily explored the large house with curious eyes. Everything looked too big for her, but she did not feel afraid anymore. Daniel watched her from a distance, unsure how to act at first. He was a businessman, used to giving orders, solving problems, and controlling situations. But being a father was something he was completely new to. Still, he tried. He sat with her during meals. He listened when she talked about small things. He even smiled sometimes without realizing it. Sarah stayed careful in the beginning. She did not want to disturb his life more than it already was. But Daniel insisted that she and Emily would not be treated like outsiders. Slowly, the tension between them started to fade. Days passed and something unexpected began to happen. Emily started getting comfortable around Daniel. She would run to him when she woke up. She would sit beside him while he worked. She even started laughing in the house, something that had not happened in a long time. Each laugh felt like healing a wound that had been open for years. Daniel noticed changes in himself too. He started canceling unnecessary meetings. He stopped focusing only on business deals. For the first time, he found himself thinking about something beyond success. One evening, while sitting in the garden, Emily came and sat beside him quietly. The sky was turning orange and the wind was soft. "Daddy," she said slowly. Daniel turned his head toward her. Hearing that word no longer shocked him. Instead, it felt like something he was learning to accept. "Yes," he replied gently. Emily looked at him for a moment and then asked a simple question. "Will you stay with me forever?" Daniel paused. It was not a business question. It was not something he could answer with logic or planning. It was something emotional, something real. He looked at her carefully and said, "Yes, I will stay." Emily smiled and leaned her head on his arm. That moment stayed with Daniel longer than any business success ever had. Sarah stood a little far away, watching quietly. Felt relief but also fear. She knew this peace was still fragile. The truth about Daniel's father still existed. The past had not fully disappeared, and she was right. One morning, Daniel received a letter. It was from his father. The moment he saw the envelope, his expression changed. He opened it slowly. The message inside was short but sharp. It warned him to end this distraction and return to his normal life. It reminded him of his responsibilities, his reputation, and his empire. Daniel read it once, then again. But this time something inside him did not react the way it used to. He placed the letter down and looked toward Emily, who was playing in the garden. Sarah noticed his silence. "Is everything okay?" she asked carefully. Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes," he said, "everything is clearer now." That evening, Daniel made a decision. He called a press conference. Sarah looked nervous when she heard it. "What are you going to say?" she asked. Daniel looked calm. "The truth," he replied. On the day of the conference, the hall was full of reporters, cameras, and flashing lights. Everyone was waiting for announcements about business, but Daniel had something completely different in mind. He walked onto the stage and stood at the microphone. For a moment, he was silent. Then he spoke. "For many years, I lived a life based on control, success, and image," he said. "But I recently discovered something that changed my life completely." The room became silent. "I have a daughter," he continued, "and I was not allowed to know her until now." Shock spread across the audience. Cameras started flashing rapidly. Daniel raised his hand to stop the noise. "I'm not here to protect my image anymore," he said. "I am here to accept my responsibility." Back at home, Emily was watching the news with Sarah. When she heard the words, "my daughter," she looked at Sarah and smiled. "Mama, he said it," she whispered happily. Sarah smiled through tears. "Yes, he did." Later that night, Daniel returned home. Emily ran to him immediately. He lifted her into his arms without hesitation. For the first time, it felt completely natural. "Did I do it right?" Daniel asked Sarah quietly. She looked at him and nodded. "You did what many people are afraid to do," she said. "You told the truth." Daniel looked at Emily again, holding her close. The noise of the past, the control of his father, and the confusion of years no longer felt stronger than what he had now. A child, a truth, and a second chance at life. As he stood there, Daniel finally understood something important. Power could build empires, but only truth and love could build a family.